In the summer of 1943, at Kursk, over 200 Panther tanks rolled towards Soviet lines. But inside these metal monsters, terror was already waiting. Why? Because the horror-looking weapon wasn't ready to go to war. Fires, mechanical failures, and deadly mistakes turned what looked like an unstoppable weapon into a nightmare for the men trapped inside. The Panther tank looked like a dream on paper. Thick frontal armor, a long 75mm gun that could punch through almost anything, and a sleek, mobile design made it seem unbeatable. Compared to older Panzer tanks, it was supposed to be the future. But here's the catch. It wasn't finished. Hitler demanded it reach the front lines fast. The designers barely tested it. Engines, armor, and weapons went straight from the factory to the battlefield. By the time the first Panthers reached Kursk, they were fragile. Fires broke out while unloading trains. Engines leaked fuel and electrical systems sparked. One wrong move inside the tiny metal box, and the entire crew could burn alive. It wasn't just fire that haunted the crews. Once they were on the battlefield, the real horrors began. Most Panther crews were green. Very few had actual combat experience. They trained on older Panzer IV tanks, not the new, delicate Panthers. They memorized controls, learned where buttons were, but never practiced under real combat conditions. The first day of battle was brutal. Crews faced minefields and wide ditches. Some tried to drive across and got stuck immediately. Tanks became sitting targets for Soviet artillery. Others froze, paralyzed by fear. In one first engagement, 18 Panthers were lost before they even fired a shot. The engineers designed a machine meant to outgun the Soviets, but the men operating it weren't ready. If Kursk was the first horror, the problems inside the Panther itself were the constant, unrelenting nightmare. The Panther's Maybach engine was powerful, but paired with a weak cooling system. High speeds? Overheat. Quick maneuvers? Sparks fly. Fuel mixture problems meant live fuel sometimes leaked into the exhaust. A small fire could erupt into a full-blown inferno inside the tank. Even worse, the fire wasn't hidden. At night, flames from the exhaust could be seen for miles. Enemy soldiers could spot the tank before it even moved into range. And inside, 5 men sat breathing smoke, trying to control a machine that might kill them at any second. This wasn't a tank crew's training exercise. It was a constant game of survival, a life-or-death struggle inside a metal coffin. But fire wasn't the only enemy lurking inside the Panther. The mechanics themselves were monsters waiting to betray their crews. The Panther was supposed to replace older Panzer tanks. It had overlapping road wheels, heavy armor in the front, and a gun that could destroy almost anything. But its weight, over 50 tons, and its rush design made it fragile. The final drive, the part that moves the tank, could break after less than 1 tank of fuel. When it failed, the Panther couldn't move. Crews had to abandon it, blow it up, or burn it to prevent enemy capture. Mechanical breakdowns accounted for more than half of all Panther losses at Kursk. Even when repair was possible, it was dangerous. Field workshops were limited. Spare parts were scarce. Tanks repaired could break down again on the way back to battle. Every movement, every push of the clutch risked disaster. And yet, despite these dangers, Panther crews were still expected to fight. But combat brought new horrors even beyond what the tank could do to them. Kursk was a nightmare of mud, mines, and Soviet artillery. Panthers, despite their design, weren't invincible. Mines tore through tracks and bottom armor, sending crews flying into chaos. One unlucky detonation could throw men against metal walls, jam controls, or rupture fuel tanks. Artillery shells didn't even have to hit directly. Near misses could shatter the tank's wheels or crack the armor, turning the Panther from a predator into a sitting duck. Crews described it as hell in slow motion. Every decision inside that tiny metal box could be your last. And yet, the men were ordered forward. Retreat wasn't always an option. If the Panther stopped moving, it became a target for Soviet gunners. If it burned, there was no escape. Every engagement was a deadly gamble. But outside threats weren't the only danger. The tank itself carried hidden killers within its own ammunition. Panthers carried high-velocity 75mm shells, enough to obliterate Soviet T-34s. But storing ammunition inside a metal box full of sparks, fuel, and heat, that was a recipe for disaster. If the armor was penetrated, even by smaller guns, the ammo could detonate instantly. One soldier called it the instant crematorium. Inside, the blast didn't just kill. You were vaporized, leaving nothing but fire and twisted metal. Crews knew that a single lucky enemy shot could turn their tank into a furnace, and that knowledge hung over them like a shadow every time they moved forward. Even if the shell didn't explode immediately, stray sparks or engine heat could ignite it. Men had to be constantly vigilant, checking fuel lines, engine temps, and the position of every shell. A second of carelessness could be fatal. If explosions weren't enough, the Panther's size made another enemy: mud, terrain, and helpless immobilization. The Russian countryside wasn't kind to heavy tanks. Kursk's fields were riddled with soft soil, trenches, and unexpected ditches. Panthers, over 50 tons, often sank into mud or got stuck on slopes. Once trapped, the tank was nearly useless. Crews tried to dig it out under enemy fire. Sometimes they used winches and ropes. Other times, they had no choice but to abandon the machine and blow it up to prevent capture. Imagine crawling out of a burning metal box into enemy fire, mud sucking at your boots as artillery shells explode all around. That was daily life at Kursk. Even simple maneuvers, turning on narrow paths, crossing rivers, or reversing under fire, could jam tracks or break axles. Each movement carried risk. For a crew, nothing was routine. Everything was a potential death sentence. And yet, the Panther did what it was built for. It could destroy enemy tanks. But that deadly effectiveness came with a grim irony. Despite its flaws, when a Panther worked, it was terrifying. Soviet T-34s and KV-1s, the backbone of Red Army armored forces, often didn't stand a chance against the Panther's high-velocity gun. Crews could knock out tanks from hundreds of meters away, all while barely exposed. But here's the catch. That same power meant that the Panther became the target of everything: artillery, anti-tank rifles, mines, and even inexperienced operators trying to retreat could trigger catastrophic failure. Every victory carried the risk of total destruction. A functioning tank on the battlefield was a beacon for death, both for the crew and for anyone foolish enough to approach. Men inside learned to respect the machine as both savior and executioner. They knew that a tank that killed enemy armor in seconds could just as easily kill them in the blink of an eye. And as if fire, mud, ammo, and artillery weren't enough, human error made survival even harder. Inside the Panther, teamwork was everything. But fear and panic could ruin it in an instant. Crews sometimes froze when the tank jolted or shuddered from hits. Miscommunication could jam the gun, lock the turret, or cause fatal mistakes. One survivor recounted how a driver panicked under fire, reversing into a ditch while the gunner tried to aim. The tank jammed, smoke filled the interior, and the crew had to abandon it mid-battle. The tight space, the heat, and the noise amplified every mistake. Inside, men were pressed against each other, sweating, shouting, and praying for survival. Even experience didn't guarantee safety. Veterans could misjudge a ditch or a slope. Exhaustion from hours of combat made attention lapses deadly. The Panther didn't forgive mistakes, inside or outside. By now, the horrors have built layer upon layer: mechanical, environmental, explosive, and human. But nothing compares to the final, chilling reality of living inside a metal monster on fire. The Panther was a furnace waiting to ignite. A single engine spark, a leaking fuel line, or a shell puncture could turn the tank into a blazing coffin. Inside, men were trapped with 5 gallons of diesel, metal walls, and high explosives. Survivors recalled the horror of fire spreading in seconds. Smoke-filled lungs, flames licked the walls. One crew member described how you could feel the heat on your bones before you even saw the fire. Attempts to extinguish flames were almost useless. Limited space, lack of water, and the constant threat of ignition from the ammo meant fire was nearly always fatal. And yet, they had to act. Crews tried to vent smoke, move levers, or reverse the tank, all while flames grew and panic mounted. Every second inside was a gamble. Escape meant crawling out through tiny hatches while artillery shells and enemy fire rained down. The Panther tank remains a symbol of deadly innovation. Historians and engineers admire its design, its firepower, and its battlefield effectiveness. But for the men trapped inside, it was something else entirely. A rolling coffin, a furnace, and a crucible of fear. It teaches us that technology without preparation, without understanding, and without care for human life can become more terrifying than any enemy. Men who survived told stories of metal, fire, and smoke, of comrades lost in seconds, and of a machine that could kill and protect at the same time. Those stories remain a testament to the courage and horror experienced inside the Panther, where every second mattered, and every decision could mean life or death. So, when you think about the Panther, don't just see a machine of war. See the men inside, their sweat, smoke-filled lungs, and pounding hearts.